dreams. We were served family style in the mess halls, from platters loaded with fresh baked bread, potatoes, baked or grilled meat, simple lettuce salads. The food was better than the food in OMAC. At Hanford, there were no rations. For 67 cents a meal, they gave us whatever we wanted, heaping platters of it. They were desperate to keep us here, to stop the hemorrhaging turnover. I surprised myself by how much I ate. Mother hadn't cooked in years, and I hated cooking, finding it grueling to prep a meal, cook it, eat it, clean up after it, and then begin the whole process again only a few hours later. Here, I felt pampered. Sometimes Beth and I shrieked at each other to be heard. There were thousands of people in the mess halls at any given moment, and even more waiting for seats. We choked down our food as quickly as possible and barely had time to finish our coffee before we were shooed away from our benches to make room for others. "Isn't this a gas?" Beth liked to say, adoring the crowds and the noise in a way that I found contagious. I agreed, smiling. The sight of all those men guffawing and teasing one another both intimidated and impressed me. There were 4 times as many men at Hanford than there were women. For the last few years, Mother and Martha were my only acquaintances. Interesting creatures in their own respects, but not nearly as physical or impetuous as the men seemed. When there was a brawl, and there were many brawls, I found I couldn't tear myself away. I wanted to watch the men beat at one another until one of them surrendered or passed out. Beth was the opposite. She couldn't stand the violence. She said it was exactly what was wrong with this world. "These boys," she'd say, rolling her eyes. But I felt that it was bigger than that, because these were full-grown men. And wasn't it impressive the way they sprang to action rather than simpering and stewing over their troubles like I did? I admired it all. These men are the men who will win this war, I thought. I was proud of them for their passion. But I did briefly wonder about my father, his shakiness and timidity. Here, he might have been bullied. It was a good thing, I told myself, that he was never allowed into the army. He'd been barred because of his eczema, which embarrassed him deeply. The men noticed us the moment we stepped too close. They raised their heads from their plates like mountain lions smelling a doe. When they turned and regarded me with their predatory grins, I awkwardly stumbled or hurried forward, reassuring myself that none of these men were as cruel as they seemed. Surely they missed their mothers, their sisters, their wives. Some of them lived with their wives and children on the campus, and some were upstanding family men, I knew, Christian men who went to the campus church every Sunday. They were only fascinated by me, not hungry for me. And if a single one were hungry, so what? Couldn't it be that beneath that tough, hard demeanor there was a gentle, doting husband just waiting to be cracked? The men responded to my nervousness like it was a bleeding wound. Their eyes trailed after me, certain I would be an easy target. It was Beth, of course, who protected me, who scolded them when the teasing and flirting grew irksome. "Leave us be," she told the men. "We're not in the slightest bit interested." Because she was beautiful and strong and mean to them, the men respected her. They put up their large, work-torn hands in mock surrender and even apologized. When she and I were alone, I told Beth about my job, about Dr. Hall and the sterile, hard beauty of Unit B. And she told me about the clinic, about the horrible accidents that happened almost daily at Hanford. She excitedly detailed the ugliest cases: a terrible burn from a mysterious chemical, broken ribs from a bad fall, a foot crushed in a rotating gear, a rattlesnake bite that led to a foot amputation. She tended to a man who had inhaled something poisonous. His entire throat was as black as charcoal, and when he spoke, he issued not words, but smoke. "His wife will be notified," she said. "It's a terrible thing if he survives. I don't think he'll ever speak properly again. We were well into our third week of work. We sat at one of the mess hall's enormous tables, the length of a Viking ship. Kathy sat with us, which I tolerated but didn't enjoy, and two other girls from our barracks. Alma, daughter of a Hungarian man and a Mexican woman, who worked the earliest food service shift, rising long before dawn to bake breads and muffins and cakes. And Susan, from Nevada, who worked in the laundry and smelled always of bleach and lye. Susan worked with a Chinese woman and a Jewish woman. "Melting pot of the world," she said irritably. But I liked that we heard many different languages and saw so many different sorts of people. I'd never seen anything like it while living in Omak. I found Alma beautiful, with her coppery skin and her hair as black and shiny as a beetle's back. She was nicer to me than Kathy, but than really anyone was. I asked Beth about the poor patient. What did he inhale? She shook her head. You know they don't tell us those things, Millie. It's all a big secret. I thought of the 3 words that Dr. Hull made me repeat every morning. Loyalty, secrecy, safety. I told her that I was working on a new safety campaign with Dr. Hull and the general manager at the Hanford site to minimize workplace accidents. Dr. Hall believes he can greatly improve conditions, I said. His goal is to make it through an entire year without a single injury. Then I'll be out of a job, Beth laughed. You must hear interesting details in your job, Millie. Has anyone told you what we're making? No one had told me much of anything, but I knew from Dr. Hall's dictation that it was a chemical element needed for the war effort. He called it the product. I almost told her this, but Dr. Hall's voice spoke to me over the sounds of the mess hall. Loyalty, secrecy, safety. I told her I really didn't know, and I wasn't even lying. Well, whatever it is, she said, it'll be great at killing Hitler. It's maiming men already, and we're not even operational yet. It was then that I noticed Tomcat, sitting on the opposite side of the table from us, a few paces down. He waved at me timidly, and I waved exuberantly back. Gordon Nair was there too. He returned my gesture with only a crude smile and wink. Don't encourage Gordon, Millie, Beth said to me crossly. He's got a dirty mind. He's full of himself, I admitted, but the man next to him is very nice. Kathy laughed. Good thing, because he's ugly as sin. He's very nice, I repeated tensely. He looks like a turtle without his shell, Kathy said. Beth pushed her plate away and stood. I'm finished. I'm going to go meet the nice man you're berating, Kathy, and I'm going to go tell the other one to stop staring at us. Please don't, I begged. He'll get cross with me. Oh, he won't, Millie. I'll make sure he's only cross with me. She set off toward them, and I paled and dropped my eyes to my dinner, staring sadly at my large bowl of canned peaches. You know why she likes you so much, don't you? Kathy said, leaning forward onto her sharp elbows. She's insecure, and it makes her feel much better about herself to be with someone like you. Alma and Susan stiffened. Don't tease her, Kathy, Alma said. Think about it, Mildred, Kathy said. And I didn't want to think about it, but there it was, an unwanted injection. Her voice was saccharine, thorn-laced. Well, I'll see you all later, she rose, leaving her tray with us, and blew us a mean little kiss goodbye. When she was out of earshot, Susan leaned forward and said, She's just jealous of Bethesda, Millie. Don't you listen to a word of it. She's the one, Alma said. But their voices were low and unconvincing, and I sensed how they seemed to enjoy Kathy's cruelty, entertaining if unjust. And I felt alone with the notion that it really did explain so much. But I remind Beth of her sister, I thought, her sad, dead sister. I automatically searched for Beth and found her standing beside the shoulders of Gordon Nair, looking down at his face. And to my dismay, she wasn't reprimanding him at all, but laughing, with one hand at her throat. This underscored underscored Kathy's point. What was she doing, laughing with the man she disliked? I hurried over to Beth's side to see what was happening. Gordon gave me a huge, friendly smile. "Mildred," he said, "sight for sore eyes. Your friend was just telling me what a terrible brute I am." When Beth turned and looked at me, I saw that, yes, she had been laughing, but it was not flirty laughter or kind laughter. It was triumphant laughter, the laughter of someone who understood her own power. "I'm sorry if I haven't been a gentleman," Gordon said. "I told Beth here I would apologize to you. Despite what she might think, Gordon Nair is a man of his word." He whipped his long legs over the bench and slipped to the floor in one athletic movement, kneeling on the linoleum before me with his hands folded in prayer. His good eye stared at my face earnestly, while the glass eye pointed at my torso. "Please forgive me, Mildred," he said. "It's only that I like you, you see, and this makes me wrong attentive." For a moment, I wondered if this was the man I'd marry, if this was the beginning of an abrupt and passionate wedding proposal. But then Tomcat stepped forward and said to me, interrupting, "Hiya, Mildred," and I knew that I would wind up with someone more like Tomcat than Gordon Nair. This didn't upset me in the least. It was just a firm understanding, like realizing your home will never be a mansion on a hill, but a quiet little farmhouse in the valley. I was fine with it. It felt comfortable to me, and I told Tomcat hello in return. Tomcat moved toward me. "I'm sorry for Gordon's behavior, too. He has no manners." Gordon rose to his feet and punched Tomcat lightly on the shoulder. "I'm a man's man," he said. But then he bowed to me. I couldn't tell if the bow was sincere or mocking. Another man stood up from his empty plate, his movements rough and loud and meant to grab attention. I recognized him from the Unit B cattle car, a short but powerful-looking man that I'd overheard another guy call Chrome Dome because of his bald head. "Get a load of this," Chrome Dome said, thumbing at Gordon. "These broads are turning our men into queers." Gordon's theatrical expression of apology shifted. His face pulled in on itself as though the light in it had been shuttered. He pivoted slowly and addressed his heckler. "I don't think I heard you correctly. Care to repeat that?" Chrome Dome dismissed the comment with a smirk and said to Beth, "You rationed sugar? I ain't seen a girl like you since San Francisco." Beth soured, taking my arm. "Let's go, Millie. Nothing but morons today. I don't care if they killed themselves for our attention." I let her guide me outside. Behind us, we heard a bit of noise, some shouting and a scuffle, but Beth didn't turn around, and I didn't either, despite the urge to rush back and greedily witness the bludgeoning. Later, we heard from Alma that Gordon and Chrome Dome fought, and that the fight was a good one, bloody, vicious, impossible to stop, until finally Chrome Dome lay groaning, spitting out teeth at Gordon's feet. I was sad I'd missed it. Beth was combing my hair on the bed when Alma told us, and she paused for a moment before saying, "Gordon infuriates me. What is it with men? Why can't they let a silly thing go?" "Hard to let it go," Kathy said, "being called a name like that." I agreed with Kathy. It impressed me that Gordon could stand up for himself. Although I would never publicly disagree with Beth, so I said instead, Gordon's apology seemed sincere, at least. Beth was silent on the matter. She combed my hair harder so that I winced. Kathy said, "I heard Gordon is on probation for a week. If he gets in another fight before Friday, he'll be gone." Beth's comb tore through my hair. "Good," she muttered. But I heard a small catch in her voice, a hesitation. "He's a troublemaker." "He sure is cute," Kathy said. "He looks an awful lot like Richard Quine," I agreed. Kathy scrunched up her mean face. "Who is that?" Beth laughed. "Millie obsesses about the Spokane-born actress Susan Peters. Richard Quine is her husband. Richard is very handsome," I added. "And Susan Peters is wonderful, just wonderful in Random Harvest. I saw it last year in Spokane, and she was there for the showing. I almost met her. She was very pretty and so very nice. I'm saving up for the exact same pair of shoes I saw her wear. I've seen them in the Sears Roebuck catalog. They'll be much more comfortable than my own shoes, which really aren't my own shoes at all, but my mother's. Mildred's in love with Gordon, Kathy sang. It took me a moment to register her lyrics. It struck me in the skull like a mallet, and its aftershock ran haywire through my bones. That's not true, I told her. My hands shook as badly as when I fought with Mother. I took a deep breath. Take it back. She sang it again, in a higher pitch this time, flapping her hands with girlish innocence. Her face was Martha's face, then Mother's face, then again, even worse, Kathy's. I kicked my chair back and approached her with my fists clenched, wanting badly to strike her. Millie, Beth said calmly behind me. Millie, she's only teasing you. To Kathy, she said firmly, wrathfully, stop it right this instant, you hear? When Kathy sang it a third time, I flattened my palms over my ears and shut my eyes and shrieked at the top of my lungs. I'd never shrieked so loudly in my entire life. The size and power of the sound blistered me. I heard the footsteps of a dozen women racing into our corner of the barracks. Kathy backed away from me, hands up, saying, okay, I'll stop. I was mid-shriek when I blacked out. Mother and I stood at the river, arguing. Take the bouquet, Mother, I said. Please take it, and I'll pick up the glass as best as I can. And Mother cried, leave me alone, Mildred. You are my biggest disappointment. Even those flowers are pathetic. A portrait of my father and his glasses lay shattered on the rocks near the riverbank. My fault, of course. But why had she forced me to carry them when we both knew how clumsy I was? The burial was the week before, busy with people from Omak Presbyterian and my father's schoolroom. But today was supposed to be our own quiet celebration of him. Just Mother, Martha, and me. This was Mother's idea. Bring his portrait to his favorite place on the Okanagan River, bury his glasses on the bank, say a few good words each about his impact on us. I was surprised, stirred even, by Mother's desire for such a spiritual ceremony. Her imagination had always before struck me as limited and barren, a dispirited purgatory emptied of all affection, but this intention came from a lovely garden in her I hadn't known existed. She loved him after all. I'd been content about all of this until 3 minutes before, when I tripped and cried out in horror as all of the breakable objects flew from my arms and crashed onto the stones. When I looked up, Mother glared down at me. Her black hair and strong shoulders blocked out the sun. I smelled her moss-laden disappointment, rich and deep, and the pain of the impact rang in my palms and wrists and knees. Martha wasn't there yet, busy parking the car in the dirt lot half a mile away. But when she descended, she poured her rancor into Mother's rancor, and I drank down the contents, choking. The shards of glass winked grimly on the uneven terrain, scattered across stone and sand. I looked down at the flowers in my right hand, pretty purple echinacea, cone flowers that Mother called a sad excuse for daisies. Didn't she remember they were Father's favorites? And my fist gripped the stem so tensely that my knuckles whitened. Mother reprimanded me for letting her down, for ruining everything, for destroying even this small celebration of my father's life. I half listened, half levitated. Her anger filled me with power, and she couldn't even see it. How my feet floated a few inches above the river rock. In the sky, the gathering clouds were the same absent gray color as the stones. She turned away from me, disgusted. I recalled the faraway look in my father's eyes when Mother mocked him. When she finally left him alone, he would glance at me, smile, offer a sour joke. I missed him. It was not intentional when I did it. When I lifted the flowers overhead and then brought the blossoms down, smack hard across the back of her skull. But the gesture was heavy with import. She reached up with a yell, clutching her head. teetering there on the patchy rocks that fell in a drunken stairwell, towards the water's edge. And for a moment, I clutched her shoulders and sensed how I cradled her very well-being in my hands, and how, if I pulled her to me, she could continue mostly uninterrupted in her tirade, and how we might still be able to laugh this mess off one day. The time crazy Mildred ruined everything and hit Mother with flowers, ha-ha. And I held her steady for a full moment, considering, but it was so painfully obvious to me that nothing would change if I didn't let her fall. And push her, even the wind through the aspens whispered it, and I acquiesced, not with a violent shove, but with a gentle letting go. Yes, that's what I did. I gentled her into the water. Gravity finished the job for me. She toppled down the bank, tangled into a senseless knot of noise where the splashes, the hollers, the groans, the cracking open of bone, the struggling. And I scurried away from the river, even as my sister, unlikely heroine, came sprinting over the lip of the shadowy hillside, her silhouette bleared by my own terror, and raced, shouting, down the slope, shooting past me into the shallows with more speed and grace than she'd ever before exhibited. Now I could only sit and watch as my sister and mother wrestled each other onto the shore. I lowered myself onto the rocks, hugging my legs, and made myself very small. I waited. I didn't mean to hurt her. I babbled into my knees. They were good-smelling knees, dreamy with baking soda baths and so smooth like an innocent girl's. I only wanted something to change. Skulls. Beth told me later I fell to the ground, thrashing. She put her comb in my mouth to keep me from biting my tongue, but I thrashed and wept and stammered in what felt to her like a scarlet rage. Kathy shouted, "She's lost it, she's possessed," and Beth screamed at her to shut up. Other women had poured into our barrack, summoned by my blood-curdling shriek, and they stood over us, mesmerized, while Beth urged them away. "She's seizing, give her room." When I returned to my senses, Beth had a cold compress to my head, one of her own blouses dipped in icy water. My lips felt dry and cracked, my gums sore from gritting the comb. "I didn't mean to," I managed, and Beth stroked my hair and hushed me. "You need to sleep," she said. "You're spent. And Kathy, I sent her away. She won't bother you tonight." She waited a moment, then asked gently, "Is this like the sleepwalking, Millie? Has this happened before?" I was baby weak, snuggled up against my friend. I shook my head and closed my eyes. "Nasty fits," I remembered my classmates saying, but that was long ago. Beth leaned over me and pressed her lips to my forehead. "Rest, sweet girl," she said. Later, an hour, several hours, the vision prodded me awake and urged me to rise. The same swampy, heady sensation fell over me, the one I always had during the vision. The sound of invisible wings in my ears. The weight of it took hold of me by the armpits and pulled me outdoors. I floated obediently east, through the dimmest shadows of the sleeping barracks. I traveled a short distance to the western bank of the Columbia River, where the water whirled along the northeastern corner of the Hanford camp. Over the river and through the woods. But there were no woods here, and my consciousness blinked in and out. I stumbled forward, lazily, drunkenly. The wings shuddered, and the pressure around my chest released. A great blue heron materialized on the step, huge, nearly 5 feet tall, her thick throat like a rope, her shoulders hunched, her legs 2 pale orange stalks with high ankles like contorted knees. She stared at me ferociously, with a round yellow eye, and then squawked, trembling, and collapsed into another creature, a pocket mouse. The mouse raced forward and sniffed anxiously at my slippered feet. Then it stretched, accordion-like, squeaking, hissing, now a rattlesnake, firm and sleek in brown and ivory scales. Auf Hauke, my German grandmother would have said, shapeshifter. The snake rattled its tail, but I felt no fear. My visions made me impenetrable. Perhaps sensing my disinterest, the heron returned to her natural form. She preened for me, and I longed to show off my own powers. I ignored the creature and glanced around me instead, waiting for the stage curtain to draw open and reveal the future. The wind nodded in her dark shawl of glittering stars, crouched with her strong thighs all around us. A few yards away lay the disembodied head of a mule deer buck. His purple tongue hung from his mouth, the heavy antlers and neck mottled with blood. Killed by coyotes, no doubt, or perhaps by a lone mountain lion. When I turned, there was the heron, grooming her feathers with the wetted orange spear of her beak. I hunkered down on a precipice overlooking the Columbia. The water coursed indifferently toward the ocean, gripped in its basement by the rocky fist of cliffs on the eastern side. The heron's black plumes stirred in the wind. I turned to her, waiting. Her beak remained closed, but she spoke to me as loud as a branch breaking. Watch the river. I watched. The water drained away. So slowly at first I wondered if I was imagining it, but then, yes, certainly the water was leaving for good, as though the basin were no more than a long serpentine bathtub from which an invisible hand had pulled the plug. The shoulders of rocks appeared like dark scabs, thousands of them, and I fought the urge to run down the side of the basin and dance across them. The heron lifted her speckled throat, and the long feathers on her neck jutted like thorns. Then she cowered in a deft movement, lifted away the hill's summit, beating her large wings ponderously, swooping toward the desolate river basin. I beetled down the hillside after her, recalling how when I was a girl, I would plunge down the bouldered embankment into the aching cold of the Okanagan River. Don't think of Mother. Don't even let yourself stop now. On the rocky beach, the heron waited for me. She pointed her beak toward the belly of the riverbed. I ambled atop the black rocks, skipping from one to another, but they shifted beneath my feet. I slipped again and again, trying to gain purchase and failing. I wasn't annoyed. It was a game. No more a fun game to play atop the rocks. And when I tripped into the small puddles of water, all that remained of the Columbia, I laughed and splashed. I put my hand against a round stone and was surprised to find it wet, not with water, but with something soft and fleshy. Algae, I assumed, moss. I drew the substance away like it were the top of a mushroom, and it came off in my palm easily with a little pop. The smell was both terrible and good, a burning like over-roasted meat. I turned the thing over in my hand and stared for a moment, disbelieving, before dropping it at my feet. It was the skin of a child's face. The black stone was no stone, but a skull, grinning at me fiendishly. I examined the other stones, the one I danced across so clumsily and merrily, and they too were skulls. And beneath them, trapped in the mud of the riverbed, were the bodies. People of all ages, small children. Others stooped and aged. A high-pitched whining started up in my left ear, the tinnitus I suffered during a vision or if I grew too exhausted. I found a woman with her breasts blackened and burned, pockets of flesh half melted. Around her, some of the skulls' mouths screamed. Others were pinned tight, addressing their end calmly as though struck dumb by its arrival. "Who are they?" I cried. "What's happened to them?" The wind whipped at me, scolding me, and some of the skulls crumbled into the dust beneath her words. When I turned, there was the heron, picking awkwardly at the bones with her nightmarish toes. She lifted her head and gazed at me with the cold death coin of her eye. Eventually, we must become who we are. The heron's face became a coyote's. Her bright beak, a dull brown snout, and the canine face snarled and barked, but the long-necked body remained, a horrific creature, winged and feral, a dog-faced bird of hell. My vision blurred. I thought, agonized, maybe it's almost over, maybe the dream is ending now. But then the coyote's features sharpened and receded, and the heron's face reemerged, the black plumes and the death eye and the killing beak, her voice like a dagger in my ear. There is more than one kind of predator. The entire breadth of the river was covered in dead bodies. Thousands, tens of thousands. Another child lay at my feet, cooked and cooled into an onyx stone. So many children, I said, and the wind whipped at me so that my eyes stung and teared. How could anyone let this happen? The heron stalked over the empty bed, hunting. They are the doomed. They will perish at the hands of the product. I shook my head in disgust. Better them than you. There must be something we can do. Only the wind answered, throwing sand into my eyes. When I blinked and wiped the blindness away, the heron was gone. A voice then, sharp, angry. My eyes ached, my body. I was up to my neck in the Columbia. Its water in a thunderclap returned all at once to the basin. Near me floated the rotting buck's head, stinking horribly of death, gazing through me with its hollowed eyes. The river took hold of it and washed it swiftly south. It would soon curl west toward the ocean. A man stood on the shoreline, waving his hands. "Hey, lady!" he shouted. "What are you, crazy?" My gingham nightgown swirled around me in the water. The wind howled at the man on the shore, telling him to leave us alone. "Christ!" he hollered. "Hang on!" The current pressed against me with a menacing force. I paddled just enough to stay afloat. Beneath me swam thousands of ghosts to be. If I swam too vigorously, I would stir them awake. Hungry for life, they would grab my ankles, my wrists, and pull me down. The current tugged on me, whining. "Enough. Come with me, Mildred." I was not suicidal, not as far as I knew, but it occurred to me how wonderful it would be to stop thinking, to stop worrying. My muscles involuntarily relaxed. There was a splash then, the man plunging into the water. "Fight the current!" he shouted, and then he swam toward me, hard toward me, big looping strokes, a much stronger swimmer than I was. His arm wrapped around my waist. He pulled me back to shore, cursing. "Be still, you'll kill us both." He dragged me from the water and released me to the ground, panting, kneeling over. He said he'd been walking along the campsite road, heading to an early shift at one of the mess halls, when he heard me calling out from the river. "Calling out?" I said. Water ran out of my nose, my eyes. I tried to remember doing such a thing, but could not. He asked me again what the hell was wrong with me. "You gave me a goddamn scare, lady." Then more gently, "You okay? You wasn't drowning?" My nightgown, huge, wet, weighed 100 pounds. I shivered uncontrollably. "Sleepwalking," I said. The man threw back his head and laughed. "You're kidding! In your bare feet? I can't wait to tell my wife about this. She won't believe it." He pointed to my ankles, and I shrank with humiliation, acknowledging I was barefoot, in my nightgown, the fabric clinging to my breasts and the plumpness of my waist and legs, revealing far too much of myself. I folded my arms over my chest. I glimpsed the soles of my feet. They were bleeding and blistered, as though they'd been burned.